Okay, it has been a while. We are at turn 43. I'm just adding a little bit of an insert here because I've been away from this game for several months at this point since I did my last upload. I changed PCs, and when I moved over to the new one, my entire filing system was gone, and I was left with just hundreds of recordings and file extensions with random alphanumeric strings generated and creation dates that were all the date that I'd copied things over, and it was just a mess. I have, out of love of this game, gotten my Dominions files back together. I think I've recovered pretty much everything at this point, which is a big relief to me. And I'm able to start resuming this series. Plus, I've got the map files, which means if I need to make additions, I can make additions. In any case, thank you everyone who's participated in the poll recently. What I'm going to be trying to do is increase the pace of videos back to around where it used to be, which is around 3 per week is my ideal. And if I can maintain that, then I'll look at some additional mechanisms for community engagement and how I can be guided in doing so now that I'm in a better position to put out videos. Anyway, not going to spam you with too many discussions about the channel. Suffice to say, it's good to be back. The vote's pretty clear. The focus is going to be on a mixture of the Dominions guides and getting through this Disciple series and then my other games. And then maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks, we'll be seeing either some Phoenix Point or some other things that might be a little bit exciting from time to time. But in any case, you've been waiting for ages. Let's go back into turn 43 of this Disciples game. Okay, turn 43, and preparation is the name of the game, and it's going to be the name of the game for a while. I'm not going to bore you with everything we do during this stage, but just to give you an example, a lot of work at the moment has gone into spreadsheeting a list of all the available thugs and super combatants we think Berytos is going to be able to put together in time for war, which is important. I've just been doing that, but if I need to take that to the rest of the team and expand on it, we will. Getting our forging optimized, and in the case of Pelagia, it means actually getting 2 armies together in time. We need to be able to push, I think, ideally, with Atlantis' support on 168 and Uruk's support on 168, and we need to be able to push on 194 and secure it. The reason, in case it wasn't obvious earlier, is that the Agarthan army is positioned right by this neutral throne. Now, while Rus and the ever-redoubtable General Confusion will no doubt make a fight of it, this is by all accounts a very, very tough army, the toughest that Agartha has put together. It is the one that finally spelled the end of TNN's brave defense, and it is now marching to handle Rus. Meanwhile, Pangaea will be shuffling as much as they can to help defend their comrades of Niflheim against an attack that we expect to come from Berytos Machaca. So, what are we doing to prepare for all this? Well, Berytos is going to put together an army which will thrust directly into Berytos and support a Hinamese attack on Agaria. First person there gets it, as long as no one's breaching the Treaty of Lunka by taking so many thrones that they can win. Atlantis has moved into my lake. They will be a force of support. Critical support, I would suggest, either at distracting Machaca or more likely coming down and supporting the push for the Wasteland Throne of the Eternal Expanse. And I am starting to put together my army. So this turn, Vanheim sent us a hammer because we're still doing some forging. We got Alt 7, we got Thaum 6, both of which are important. We're going to Alt 8 next. I'm trying to decide if I need to fit Evocation into the list. We will see. Either way, eventually I want to get to Alt 9. Alt 9 has all the good stuff in it, and we will unleash that soon. In terms of actually building an army, we have 2 liches now. Liches, of course, can create more liches. So if you get them the death boosters, they can create more of themselves. We have a limited supply of death boosters at the moment, but for example, we can just lichcraft again, and next turn we will have 3 high-level death mages. Death magic is going to be a vital addition to our battlefield repertoire. It's something that we do not have at all in our ordinary lineup. Plus, liches have great map move, they're mobile, they're amphibious, and they're immortal high-level casters. There's nothing not to like. They're going to be a very important part of the army that strikes against Umbor. They're also not disadvantaged in the dark, which is always handy. In terms of getting a little bit more of an army, we're conjuring Naiad warriors. These Kenids, I've talked about Kenids before, they're just good, high-quality medium infantry troops that happen to have ore as well. They've got average hit points, but they've got quite a lot of protection from the early age, good stats, and they have a reasonably reliable weapon. With appropriate buffs, these are way, way better than Turtle Warriors. The problem is they don't hit particularly hard, which means against high level and tough threats, they're not going to chop through the protection that reliably. But if all we need is a troop front line, having a few of them sprinkled in with the Turtle Warriors, not that I'm suggesting for a moment the Turtle Warriors are not the greatest unit in the history of Dominions 5, because obviously they are, the Keenids will just bulk out the army a little bit. And then there's this giant ball of mages. So what will happen is I will, before we need to attack, build a lab here at Moss Woods, and Moss Woods will become our initial staging ground. It's not perfect as a staging ground because it's not forted and it doesn't have great supply, so we'll need to keep that in mind. But, you know, hey, it is what it is. Meanwhile, we are trying to push Dominion a little bit onto these shores. Why? Because if we've hit... Now that we've hit Thalm 6 and Alt 7, there's an option eventually in the future to go for... So research isn't quite there, but we do plan to go for Vengeful Waters eventually and as our defensive option, and that means preaching all of this back up so it actually functions as a defensive tool, if that makes sense. In any case, I'm not going to dwell too much on this turn. I'm going to try and keep these preparation turns moving. I'll talk through my thinking and the information I get and the preparations, but I really want to get to the point where we're actually going to have a punch-up, which is going to be a few turns away yet due to the length of the non-aggression pact that we had with Berytos. And you can bet that Team Chris will hold us to every turn of that non-aggression pact, as they are entitled to do, in order to shield their rush. There are players out there, final note on this, I promise I won't dwell on it, there are players out there that feel that throne rush attempts void naps. As far as I'm concerned, unless the nap says that, then the plain reading of most non-aggression pacts is that a throne rush does not void it. It is up to you if you're the kind of person who will break it in those circumstances. I am not. I will not break the letter of a treaty. And my team is of one mind with this. So there will be no nap breaking. We will hold to it to the maximal until the turn count expires, and then we will aid our allies and hope that it is soon enough to push back Team Chris and prevent them from winning the game by seizing 128 and 51 and winning, because that would be adios, see you all again some other time, and that would be the end of the game, and that would be very sad given all the long-term planning that has gone into this. So I'll click ahead to turn 44 and we'll see what happens. Okay, turn 44, and Snek, he who walks before Zardos, has cast Eternal Pyre. This is just another sign that that team is still got a lot of not just offensive power, but some economic power behind them. So adding those extra fire gems every turn will help them. Agartha can turn them into Magma Kid summons, and the others all have great uses for them at this stage of the game too. There's a lot of fire. Sorry, not a lot. There are some fire mages out there in their lineup that they can utilize. There are forging options. There are summoning options. Never bad to get an extra 20 fire gems per turn. For context, I am getting 4. This is my current gem lineup. We're doing well in terms of the gems, but really we're all about the research over here in Team Underwater Bastards. This Agarthan army, I believe, is allowed to move into 133, I think next turn, if I've got my counts correctly. I will check that soon. We can see their other threat vector is forming up here in Machaka in 15. This one has 2 ways that it can attack 51. Either it will be merging with these forces that are in 40 eventually in 46. They will use magic to freeze these provinces, because they would not normally be frozen because of the heat scales involved in Machaka's dominion. So either they will nuke their own dominion or they will use a spell. I suspect what they will do is use Buddhas to destroy their dominion in their territory, have Niflheim's dominion rush over, that will freeze the lake, and then they will launch an assault across. Or alternately, they can hook round the long way. They can go Black Alps 14, Robberholm 28. The problem with that route is that it means they don't get to link up with the forces from 40 until the very last moment when these undead units cross the river. And that makes them vulnerable to being dropped individually, right? Because this army will have a lot less of the mage support and the mass that it otherwise would have. So, I suspect that they'll come here and try and freeze that river, but let's wait and see. We're doing much of the same. We've got another Lich. So you can see we've got 2 Liches here, got another Lich down here, got another Lich here. I'll rename them soon. So we're building up, I think we've got 4 Liches at this point, and we really want to get up to like 5 or 6. I'll ask for more Death Gems from my colleagues so I can keep summoning. I think I have some Death Gems sitting around on mages that I can take off, and that'll give me 1 more cast for this turn. Just 1 Lich a turn is an acceptable rate at this point, although if I get a Staff and enough Death Gems, I could hypothetically go to 2. Found no gems, and Varnheim, the elves, the glorious elves, are doing their best to just cause an ongoing annoyance in the Agarthan backline. But I strongly suspect that at this point, Team Chris is going to win the game. So they're not worried about province count per se. They're probably just worried about bull rushing the thrones and ending it. Which is how you can play Dominions, right? When you see an opening, you go for it. And I suspect they're going to bull rush right for those thrones. We bulking up the army, so Pelagia is staging ground 1. There's a few troops over here in High Mill. Mosswoods is the other staging ground. Lab needs to go up soon. Lich can do it now that he's searched the province if I need to do it, or I can wait maybe 1 more turn, or even 2. Anyway, point is, as long as a lab goes up there before everyone has to stage there, that's good enough. I'm going to need to get Naiad support for this army as well. That means probably getting a transformed Naiad that can do the job. So I'm going to get on that. That'll be my high-level nature and water support for the army. So the full range of magic that we'll need is we need high-level water, high-level nature, high-level death, and high-level astral through a big communion battery, and then everything else, anything else that we can throw on there that might be handy. You'll notice we do have an option to bring fire in on a teleport basis by making our fire-wielding hero. If we give him water breathing, he can teleport to join the army as soon as we're ready, rather than just forging. So he could teleport to Mosswoods, join this force, and then we would have fire magic in our army as well, which would be handy. Research, we're going to Alt 8. Alt 8 is good. It's not incredible, but it's good. It will give us Will of the Fates, and it will give us the run for Army of Gold, Army of Lead, and Wish, all of which are good spells to have access to. So, how big is this army at this point? 138 units. We now have 30 Keenids, a whole bunch of Turtle Warriors, and the mage lineup just keeps increasing, but we're going to have to consolidate. Preaching is going relatively well. We got the lake back this turn. We're hopefully going to get these land provinces too. I'm just really crunched on money, and the reality is our allies need money too. Berytos and Atlantis both need cash in order to do their operations. Particularly Berytos can be quite efficient in terms of funding its operations if we give it a little bit of money, because they're working off this tiny grip of territory, but are probably the most powerful offensively of us. That or it's Atlantis. I'm third, but I'm going to be creative with what I've got, because they are now in the stage of the game where they can put out, they can start putting out super combatants. So they can start putting out Telkeens, they can start putting out lots and lots and lots of geared Melia. They can make life hard for other people in that way. Plus they have the Ghost Army, which are good on siege attack and siege defense. All handy. I'm not going to dwell. That's turn 44. We'll go to turn 45 and we'll see if the Agarthan army moves. See you soon. Okay, game's on. Agarthan army is now in 133, which means it can move to 128 next turn. Army of Machaka has gone invisible and the 27 army has advanced. We know the Machakan army is not here, so it is here or here. This makes infinitely more sense to me because this is still a river crossing. So looks like they're all meeting up in 46 in the very near future, and then it's game on for the throne at 51. Pangaea will get there just in time with as much siege defense as they can throw together, as many summons and whatnot. You can see they've handed the fortress over to Pangaea, and the reason they've done that is because it means that Pangaean mages can now, in that province, cast spells and do summons and whatnot. It also makes it much easier for the dryads that are based in their province to operate, because the dryads can hide inside the fort walls, which is handy. Just gives them a little more freedom in what they do and less likely to be to run into trouble. So that was a good decision, handing over that fortress there. Sorry if it sounds like I'm rambling, it's because I'm getting nervous. I'm seeing our allies all generally mobilized in the directions they need to go. I can see an army of mainly Melkarts. Handy, and then looks like a whole bunch of chaff. Flying undead chaff, skeletons, a whole bunch of RVM, including a lot of Dawn Guards. 110 mainly Dawn Guards. Oof. So, big Hinnomite force marching, I presume, for Agaria 43. You can see we've got our big stack of ghosts and mages that we are massing up there. For a similar sort of thing, a push into Berytos, and Atlantis is grouped up primarily in this province here. They have a secondary army, but more of their super combatants here. Get Bent GC, that is a legacy name from when we were not happy with GC. GC, we're currently fine with you. You are defending this throne. You are the noble people of Rus, and we have never had any hostile feelings towards Rus or Pangaea. None, ever. What else happened this turn? Atlantis sent us Astral that we needed. We cast Voice of Tiamat and found nothing. It's never too late to find gems. We got our Naiad. Our Naiad will now have to transform and hope that we don't get the Feeble Mind. We have luck too, so the chance of getting it is very low, but non-zero. But ideally we need a Naiad in that province that can do the magic, so better to get it summoned now. Varnheim doing what Vanheim does. Atlantis killing independence. Ooh, undead independence. Random events. Etc. Oh, and then being unlucky in Parched Expanse, where even more independents spawn and drive off the Mages of the Deep, killing 2 in the process. So that is unfortunate, because those forces there are important to his research battery, and eventually will probably defend us if our allies ever turn on us. So probably not worth it for a province that generates 2 gems. The Beholder, I guess, a province is a province. And he couldn't have known. None of us knew that there was going to be more undead spawning exactly the turn that he cleared it. He planned for it. So, here's what's going to happen. Rus has a giant army of stuff. So, Sacred Bears, Draconians, lots of mages, in particular lots of air elemental summoners. And between them, they have to figure out a way to defend Great Wall. Now, they are not sure whether they're going to stand and fight this turn, or whether they're going to pull back and then move back on. The problem with the latter is that it would allow the enemy to Wizard Tower technically, but Pangaea is confident that they will not have 51 cracked in one turn once it's sieged, which gives us that little bit extra time that we need. Either way, I still feel like I'm in a little bit of a sprint, getting the mages and the gear together as quickly as possible, so do my allies. But it is what it is, and when the offensive comes, we're going to have to make it count, because we're not going to have that many turns to spare. I'm going to do an exact turn count as we get close, always relying on knowing how long until they can claim the theoretical required number of thrones to win. So, the key at this stage of the game, I think, is very good comms with your allies, and macroing an army, a viable army, as quickly as possible. This force over here is great, but really I think the importance is the army that's going to be coming out of the capital and pushing 194, because that's my spoiler. If I can take 194, especially if someone can take Agaria 43, then we've got considerable insulation against them taking even both of the Team GC thrones, which is what it seems like the enemy plan is. The enemy plan is obviously to take both Team GC thrones, and that's all she wrote at that point. So, turn 45 done. Let's chunk along to turn 46, and then inevitably I'll spend hours thinking about what to do next. Turn 46, coming up soon. Okay, it's turn 46, and you'll remember how I said there was a small chance of transformation going wrong? There you are. Cool. So, that's, yeah, it's problematic. That's a Naiad gone. So we're going to need a replacement Naiad. We can eventually recuperate this Naiad. But yeah. Not an easy thing to do. Like, that's a gift of health exercise in and of itself. So that Naiad's out. Going to have to make another one. That's a lot of gems wasted, unfortunately. Team GC elected not to defend the initial, so what they've probably done is scouted that force on 128. I'll have a discussion with them about that. And then they've got this giant army on Femoria, 340 units, mainly Great Bears, but also Shrewd Berserkers, Draconians, Bear Warriors, Thunder Priests. Got some Jmays. This will come down to mage support, but that Agarthan army is very dangerous. It's got a whole bunch of tools available to it. Meanwhile, we don't have an offensive from the Macharkans yet, and for some reason we've got Berytos coming in to join the assault on this throne, which is not surprising. Interesting, but it does mean they're going to be able to shield this flank. But I'm also surprised that Niflheim has decided to go here, because from 73, I would have remained at 73 as Niflheim, so you could move back onto the throne, which would allow you to force there to be 2, 3, 4, 5 fort battles by abusing the turn resolution order in Disciples games. But they've gone offensive. They've come out to Sanafe 64, and it is what it is. Other than that, they've claimed the Oracle of the Throne of Sorcery, rather. So, if we look at their current position, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points claimed. Is those 3. This one here is not the 3-pointer they need to give them the win, I'm pretty sure. I'll check my notes. I'm pretty sure the 3-pointer is this one down here. Which I don't believe has actually been claimed. Or, yeah, that's what I think it is. Either way, this one, I think this one alone is enough to win, or you need both. But I will confirm. I'll try and remember to talk about that in turn 47 once I've talked to Pangea about it. My original conception was that both were probably required. The alternative is they've claimed this one. Look, let's just say I'm going to get back to us with the throne count. My assumption was both of these thrones claimed equals defeat, and I think that's the situation that we find ourselves in. I'll get that clarified and come back soon. And by soon, I mean next turn. In the meantime, we need to wish Rus luck with their attempt to contest at 128. Pangea will be in a position where they have to hold at 51. And we and everyone else are going to have to bull rush at 168, 194, and 43, using the time we have left available to us, and take enough points off that we can compensate for if either of the thrones permanently falls in GC's sphere. Simple enough. Well, it's not simple, but it is what it is. You might be wondering what my commander is doing over here, specifically what SSG-73 is doing over here. SSG-73 is just finishing up a search, and then he's going to come home to Moss Woods. SSG-73 is going to be involved in some schemes and shenanigans back home, and then is eventually going to flee over to this lake, for reasons that, again, are related to both schemes and or shenanigans. That said, this army starting to look good in terms of concentration. We're still recruiting extra mages into it. What we need now is, as I said, we need to get the lab up, this density of death mages. Thaumaturgy 7 is going to be finished very soon, which is handy because that's our Divine Water, Vengeful Water unlock, which I've been waiting for. And then at the moment, I've got Enchantment 9 for the obvious awesomeness that is Gifted Nature's Bounty and also Arcane Nexus. However, there is stiff competition with Alt 9, and also I'm considering a bizarre deviation to Evocation 6. Points to the people who can work out why I might be considering doing that. Berytos has put up a fort in the cave. They've got defense duty. They've got Vedes, militia, and Cynocephalian warriors. So that's a bunch of siege defense kind of stuff behind a palisade. They'll try and fortify that. When we go to breach that fort, there are going to be problems. Here is the problem about there being a fort in 194. We're going to have to spend at least one turn breaking that fort. And breaking that fort, especially if they might have iron walls, means bringing a lot of siege strength. The problem with bringing a lot of siege strength to a cave province is if you bring human chaff equivalents, so size 2 humanish troops as your siege chaff, and someone is defending in a cave with a super combatant, like for example the Drakon that is sitting right here. Sorry, we're just going to watch the Drakon intervene at the moment here. So this Drakon jumped in to put an end to raiding shenanigans, I believe. So this Drakon is E5, A2, N6. We've seen it before. It's got nature gems. It has a Precious, which gives it attack skill 4, so it's attacking at 23. It is magic resistant 19 and regen 20%. It's cast Strength of Gaia, which is why it's getting the extra regen, but there it is. Cool. Oh, and it can howl. Obviously, it's nature 6. Anyway, so it's just a really tough super combatant that can destroy armies. It's a brutal Drakon. What you're going to see here is Van is eventually overwhelmed by howl. Plus the Drakon poison. So, how many wolves can Vanheers kill? Vanheers can kill many, many wolves, but eventually they will be fatigued out and overwhelmed, especially if a Drakon comes in and chips down their HP with poison and things like that. Anyway, this Drakon can be on defense. So, if I'm Berytos and I want to hold this fort, and I think I'm about to be attacked, and it's going to be pretty bloody obvious when my entire army moves to Mosswoods, my defense move is Drakon, Earthquake, Patrol. And what that does is do a whole bunch of 20 damage cave earthquake hits on a bunch of squishy little human mages and troops and wipes out all the siege power that I'm going to need to break that fort. So here's what's going to happen. The initial breaking of that fort is going to be accomplished remotely. It's going to be accomplished remotely if I can, using Crumble, and I'm going to have to gear an army to be able to survive those sort of cave defensive measures. I'm sending a human army into a cave. This is a problem. I'm going to be at negative attack. I'm going to be at negative defense. So I'm not going to be particularly good at my job versus what I'm fighting. And I'm going to be vulnerable to Earthquake. Problematic. You've got to have options to deal with it. I think I've got a couple of options to deal with it, but we can wait and see on that. Side note, I just want to give some style points to our friend Nasigen, who's running Utgard. So he's got some blessed Jotun Scouts. So Jotun Scouts are sacred. He has geared them. So these are shock resistance, fire resistance, regen, blood bond, and he is sending around pairs of Jotun Scouts geared. Instead of using Stratir, they can blood bond with each other. They have weapons, and he is taking provinces with scouts. Is this efficient? Is 30 gems worth of items on 2 scouts efficient? Well, it's gold efficient. It's temple/lab efficient. Well, it's lab efficient. But no, I would probably still use raiding Scrati, but it's working, and it costs only a couple more gems than gearing a Scrati. And while they're not as good as one Scrati, they're good enough. So rating 183 it is, which is handy. So that's where we're at. It's turn 46. There's some climactic battles coming up. We're not allowed to intervene just yet. We're going to have to position... I think I'm going to position either next turn or the turn after. So that we can go in as soon as our treaty winds up. I'm going to try and click along as soon as possible because I'm sure you want to see the army, the Grand Army of Pelagia that I intend to assemble in 208 Mosswoods. So, we'll be back in a day or two with turn 47. Okay, it's turn 47. I asked for a lot of help from Berytos, and Berytos has provided. They have provided a Skull Staff, which I will need. They have provided Death Gems from Atlantis, which I will need. They have provided boosters and many, many lightless lanterns. You might think this is an arbitrarily large number of lightless lanterns. In fact, it is exactly the number of lightless lanterns I believe I need in order to hit my research goals in time. So we hit Thaumaturgy 7, so we can Vengeful Water whenever we need to now. But I've started on Evocation. So we're hitting Evocation and we're running to Evocation 6. I'll let you in on the secret. The reason we're going to Evocation 6 is because there is a spell at Evocation 6 called Wailing Winds that everyone who plays this game loves, hates, but is at very least hopefully familiar with. It is a death air cross-path spell that forces your enemy to make continuous morale checks. This is one way to get enemy super combatants that are not berserking or fearless to eventually fail and rout, either by routing themselves or by routing everything else on the battlefield so they then HP rout. I am worried about the Drakon. I'm really worried about the Drakon. I'm also worried about all sorts of other nasties that hypothetically could be put in 194 in order to get in my way. So, as Pelagia, a nation which has, I believe, access to Air 1 and no death access, my intention is to empower a Lich in Air, because we have the Air Gems and we're not doing anything bloody else with them, and have a Wailing Winds caster as one of the Liches supporting my primary army. And for that, I will go to Evocation 6. It puts a time limit on anything non-fearless on the opponent's side of the field, and I do not think even a team that is as good as the one we are playing, so even against Team Chris, which is a very solid team, they perform very well so far, I'm not sure they'll be expecting Wailing Winds from Pelagia. That's not top of my list on things that I would expect. Yeah, anyway, other things for the turn. So that was all just receipt. We've got another Naiad down here. We're going to have to attempt to transform again. And hopefully this time we don't Feeble Mind again. Worst case scenario, we're going to have to bring I Am Free for the first time, which is our backup Naiad, who's meant to be the Eastern Front Naiad, is going to have to come back over and provide some support. But really, I don't want that to happen. Other than that, no climactic battles, no forts under siege yet. This might be a fort constructing, but as you can see, Pangaea has brought together 250 units. The most common unit is a main ad, but there are White Centaurs are the second most common unit. And they've got extra balls of chaff that they can move in if needed. So it's not moving, thankfully, it's not moving as frightfully quickly as it could. The Hinnomite force is now basically where it needs to be. The Melkarts, I believe, are up here. And the troops are here moving into Ashington next turn. They will be on the border. Berytos is getting ready to go. Yeah, we're getting frightfully close now. We're getting frightfully close. I was thinking about talking through the army that I'm building, but it's better just to talk about it, I think, once it's actually in position. So I might save myself for then. Other than that, very little actually changing, and I don't see a reason to talk about nothing. So let's move one step closer to the Great Anti-Throne Rush War, brought to you in slow motion. Give me a sec. Okay, it's the turn before, and so it will be the last turn of this episode. Reminder to me when I'm cutting these, this must be the last turn of an episode. So, we have assembled the Grand Army of Pelagia. Some of our troops are starving due to lack of supplies, but we can resolve the supply issues next turn. That is due to a lack of forethought on me. I only asked for supply items a little bit too late, and I didn't make enough myself, and as a result, there's some morale problems with some of my units. But I'm going to tell you in a moment why that isn't a problem, which is why I wasn't obsessive about it. But the Grand Army is assembled. We will look at that in a moment. The Grand Army of Rus is assembled, and it looks like they are actually able to push Agartha. Agartha saw the army, decided not to take the fight, moved off. So we're looking for another climactic battle on 128 in the near future. Meanwhile, Machaka has moved on to Pangaea and begun sieging. By all accounts, they have been hit really, really hard, but they have not broken that fort. Pangaea is holding, and they think they can hold just that bit longer. And that's important to our planning. Meanwhile, Niflheim's out here sieging 34. Alright, so let's talk about where we're positioned, where our allies positioned, how much time we have, and what we're doing. We have a little bit of time. We have a little bit of time because this fort can't be assaulted next turn. We know it can't be claimed the following turn. And this one, as well as not being enough to win, needs to be retaken and then claimed. Well, retaken, then wizard towered and claimed, possibly. So there's a little bit of time. In particular, if this has as many turns as we have, we don't have to storm this throne next turn. We can afford to storm it the turn after. And that confirms what I was hoping our planning was going to get to be. I won't talk about us first. I'll talk about Berytos first. Berytos and Atlantis. Berytos and Atlantis are arrayed, as you can see, to seize 53, but also to come ashore at 16 and 9 with their forces, and come up from the south to attack Agaria. At the same time, Hinnom is going to be able to push in from the Enkidu territory and has pushed in to Endless Plains, 60. So they're in, one turn ahead of us because of when their treaties lined up. These armies are going to be able to follow up behind the screen of thugs or super combatants. I haven't seen the gearing yet, which this provides a degree of protection from the armies, just in case there were like army killing spikes waiting in these provinces, and they can then move on to Agaria. They will need the armies to crack Agaria, and there will probably be significant defenses on Berytos itself, but I'm hoping Hinnom will be able to accomplish the goal. If not, Berytos can at the very least move on to Berytos the turn after next, which should give them something to think about, and if need be, support attacks onto Agaria. This is Ghosts, Telkeens, we've got Devils, and we've got the ability to do some teleportation shenanigans as well. Whether we use that on turn 1, I'm not so sure. Atlantis is in a position with this army to actually push north or south. They've moved back here because of the need to potentially support the thrust against Agaria or come up behind Machaka. Also to threaten Machaka and maybe force them to keep some units at home. But really, ideally, I would rather that this Atlantean army work its way south through Ganumia, which is currently occupied by everyone's favourite random event trolls. I'd rather them come south to 168, and I think Stalin will concur, to support my offensive there. So Atlantis will basically skewer this area and start cutting it up with provinces taken here, provinces taken down here, maybe this put under siege. I'll review the plans a little bit later. You'll see how they play out next turn. Basically, our plan is to cut this umbilical that links Agartha to the northerners, collapse Berytos as fast as possible, while I do a desperate take and hold as long as possible on 194, but really I'm probably not going to be able to accomplish much more than that. I'll also be launching a secondary army into 191, and then maybe try and reduce Droigar, because letting them have a bunch of Magi is a bad idea. GC can fight this. Good on GC. And good old they can swing in this way, or they can go around the long way, but they're probably going to come in this way, and they can threaten Eternal Expanse from that direction. So we've got threats against that throne, and that throne to compensate for the need to hold this throne and this throne. Works out. What have I got going from a military perspective, and what am I planning? Why does it not matter that my troops are starving that much? So, this is the Grand Army of Pelagia. It is 317 units strong, it is overwhelmingly turtle warriors, and then it is a gigantic communion. So I haven't scripted this yet, but you are going to have a gigantic communion of our good old Ictid Pearl mages, cap-only mages who are here to boost their colleagues and die. You've got a clustering of death mages who will be casting the big death spells. You've got a Naiad who I decided not to transform and instead just get the homesickness on, because she'll be here for the offensive to cast the big nature. And then you've got SSG 73. SSG-73 is actually to throw up a Dome of Arcane Warding on Moss Woods. Because if I was Team Berytos Machaka, I would see that gigantic force just north of my throne, and I'd be tempted to drop it or nuke it with some sort of attack spell if I had one. And they may well have one in range. They may well want to drop a god on me or something like that. So I will script up just in case they teleport attack me. But ideally, the Dome of Arcane Warding has a good chance to bounce those spells off, which is handy. That's what the god is here for, to Arcane Warding the staging province. It's another reason why I needed a lab here, as well as the fact that it means I can hand out gems and gear to everyone who's here and get them ready for the offensive. I'm not going to move the entire army onto Umbor this turn, because I think there might be a trap in Umbor. So I'm going to send a small unit to Umbor, 194, and most of this army, enough to bring the supply limit down and severely damage the walls of TNN, are going to move and they're going to hit TNN. My goals are several-fold. To trip any trap that might be patrolling at 194 with a relatively small force, so I know what I'm dealing with. To seize the province at TNN, which means that there are two friendly provinces between Greater Wild and this province, which reduces the move distance. To trap the units that are in TNN, and TNN is also a very valuable province. What this will do, I think, is minimize my immediate risks. The other advantage to doing this is because of the bizarre way, not bizarre, but you just need to understand the rules, because of the way teleporting works in Dominions. If someone tries to teleport onto their own fort which is under siege, they don't attack the besieging army. They land inside the courtyard of the castle and set to defense mode. For that reason, troops and mages that are stationed on TNN are safer from being airdropped by the Drakon or any of the other team's gods or super combatants than they are in Moss Woods. At Moss Woods, there's a 50% chance that Dome of Arcane Warding bounces off the teleport attack. At TNN, the teleport attack cannot work, because they will 100% of the time just land in the fort itself and not attack the surrounding force. So I'm actually really safe moving on to TNN and then moving into Umbor 194. We'll attack 191 immediately. There's no reason not to. We're going to empower in air and rename our Lich over here. He will become an aircaster, and then what will happen is he will get a movement item and he will be able to make it to the Umbor fight in one turn over the intervening provinces. And that will be how we combine. We will break Umbor relatively quickly thanks to Crumble support, which I have arranged. Not sure where the Crumble caster is based at the moment. I will click through. Sorry, a lot to keep track at the moment, and I don't have my spreadsheets open when I'm recording. I'm using spreadsheets at this stage of the game to remind me of where everything is, and I've split things up in army groups, and I have reminders to make sure I don't miss anything. So we'll move on to TNN. We will hit and crumble this turn, just in case we need two crumbles to start breaking down Umbor's defenses. We'll trip whatever defenses are there, and the turn after we will combine, breach, and we will just suck up the assault. I will take you through my scripting next turn once it's done. If my army has survived, if my army has somehow been destroyed, I can save the time of covering my scripting, because it's not very good and not going to learn from me if I'm the kind of guy who gets his army killed on a diversionary attack against 201. So that's that. We've got a lot of battles coming up next turn. There'll probably be another battle on Green Wall. There will almost certainly be battles in this sector here, as Hinnom rolls in and considers putting Agaria under siege, or maybe the Melkarts will just stay on this province and the armies will consolidate. Either way, Theridos Atlantis will basically move in next turn, and I will attack three provinces. I will attack 191 with this army here, which is a Naiad, a small booster corps, and a couple of mages, and one death mage, which is handy. I'll show you their scripting when they attack. We will launch most of this army, or a significant chunk of this army, onto 201, both to protect it and to solve our supply issues and to enable movements from 217, which will be the empowered death mage. Then we will combine the turn after on Umbor and breach and seize it, and hopefully prevent this game from being over. I would be lying if I said I wasn't nervous, but when you're facing a throne rush by a good team, you have no right not to be nervous. But we've got the entire map working for us. Everyone is trying to stop this rush taking place. And you know what? After 48 turns of biding our time, I'm actually keen to see if Pelagia can actually fight anything. And that's what we'll discover in turn 49. See you then.